Sarah Martinez looked at the clock on the restaurant wall. It was already 7 in the evening. Her feet hurt from standing all day, but she still had 4 more hours of work ahead of her. She picked up her cleaning cloth and walked to table 12. The rich people sitting there did not even look at her as she wiped down their table. "More champagne," the woman in the expensive dress said without looking up from her phone. Sarah nodded and walked away to get the bottle. She was used to being invisible to these people. The Grandview restaurant was the fanciest place in the city. Tonight was special. Once every month they held a big charity dinner. All the important people came. The mayor was there with his wife. The richest man in town sat at the corner table. Famous doctors, lawyers, and business owners filled every seat. Sarah had worked at this restaurant for 3 years. She knew all about these monthly events. The same people came every time. They wore clothes that cost more than Sarah made in 6 months. They talked about buying new cars like Sarah talked about buying groceries. She walked between the tables with her water pitcher. At table 5, 2 men talked about buying a new building downtown. At table 8, a woman showed off her new diamond ring to her friends. The ring probably cost more than Sarah's rent for a whole year. Sarah filled water glasses and tried not to listen to their conversations. But it was hard not to hear them. They talked so loudly, like they owned the world. Maybe they did own parts of it. "Did you hear about the Johnson family's new yacht?" One woman asked her friend. "Oh yes, it's bigger than their old one. They said the old one was too small for their parties." Sarah almost dropped her pitcher. She could not imagine having one yacht, let alone thinking it was too small. She lived in a tiny apartment with her mother and younger brother. They shared one bathroom and had no air conditioning. The restaurant looked beautiful tonight. White flowers sat on every table. Golden lights hung from the ceiling. The floor was so clean it looked like a mirror. Sarah knew it looked this good because she and the other workers had spent all day making it perfect. She walked to the kitchen to get more bread for the tables. The head chef, Carlos, was busy making fancy food for the guests. "How are you holding up?" Carlos asked her. He was one of the few people at work who treated Sarah like a real person. "I'm okay," Sarah said. "Just tired. My second job starts at midnight, so it will be a long night." Carlos shook his head. "You work too hard, Sarah. When do you sleep?" Sarah smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I sleep when I can. My family needs the money." She took the bread basket and went back to the dining room. The guests were eating their first course now. Sarah watched them eat food that cost $50 per plate. That was what she made in a whole day of work. At table 3, she heard a man talking about his son's college. "Harvard is expensive," he said, "but money is no problem. We want the best for our boy." Sarah thought about her own dreams. She had wanted to go to college too. She had been a good student in high school. Her teachers said she was smart. But there was no money for college. After graduation, she went straight to work to help her family pay rent. The evening went on. Like this, Sarah walked from table to table. She brought food, filled glasses, and cleaned up messes. The rich people talked and laughed. They did not see her as a person. She was just part of the furniture to them. Around 8:30, Sarah noticed something different. There was a big black piano in the center of the room. It was beautiful and shiny. Usually someone played music during these fancy dinners. But tonight, no one sat at the piano bench. Sarah loved music. When she was little, her grandmother had an old piano. Sarah would sit for hours and try to make pretty sounds with the keys. She taught herself to play by watching videos on the library. Computer. Music was her secret dream, but dreams did not pay bills. The event organizer, a thin woman named Mrs. Henderson, looked worried. She kept checking her phone and looking at the empty piano bench. Sarah could see her talking to other staff members. They all looked concerned about something. Sarah continued working, but she kept watching Mrs. Henderson. The woman's worry was growing. She made several phone calls, walking away from the guests so they could not hear her. At 9 o'clock, Mrs. Henderson's worry turned into panic. Sarah saw her talking to the restaurant manager, Mr. Williams. They both looked at the piano and then at the guests. Some of the older people at the tables kept looking at the piano too. They seemed to expect music. Sarah walked closer to hear what was wrong. "The pianist is not coming," Mrs. Henderson whispered to Mr. Williams. "His car broke down 2 hours away. He cannot make it tonight." Mr. Williams looked upset. "These people expect music with their dinner. This is a disaster." "I called every other pianist in the city," Mrs. Henderson said. "No one is available on such short notice. It's Saturday night." Sarah felt bad for them. She knew how important these events were for the restaurant. The rich people paid a lot of money to come here. They expected everything to be perfect. The two continued talking about what to do. Sarah listened while she cleaned a nearby table. "Maybe we should make an announcement," Mrs. Henderson suggested. "Tell them the pianist is sick." "That will ruin the whole evening," Mr. Williams said. "Look at Mrs. Patterson over there. She comes here every month just for the music." And Mr. Chun brought his business partners to impress them. Sarah looked at the guests. Some of them did seem to be waiting for music to start. The older woman at table 7 kept looking at the piano with a smile. She was probably Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Henderson tried calling more people, but no one could help. The piano sat silent while the guests finished their main course. Soon they would expect dessert and music. But there would be no music tonight. Sarah felt something strange in her chest. It was like a voice telling her to do something. But what could she do? She was just a waitress. These people did not even know her name. She looked at the piano again. It was so beautiful. She wondered if it sounded as good as it looked. Her fingers moved slightly like they were remembering old songs. The guests were getting louder now. They had drunk more wine with dinner. Some of them were looking at the piano and asking each other when the music would start. Sarah knew this was going to be a problem. Without music, the guests might not be happy. If the guests were not happy, it would be bad for the restaurant. If it was bad for the restaurant, it might be bad for her job. She needed this job. Her family needed this job. But as she looked at that beautiful, silent piano, something inside her started to grow. It was small at first, like a tiny seed. But it was getting bigger with each passing minute. Sarah walked to the kitchen with a tray of empty plates. Her hands were shaking a little, but not from carrying the heavy tray. The feeling in her chest was getting stronger. She kept thinking about the piano and the disappointed faces of the guests. In the kitchen, Carlos noticed her worried expression. "What's wrong?" he asked while plating desserts. "The pianist didn't come tonight," Sarah said quietly. "Mrs. Henderson is really upset. The guests are expecting music." Carlos shook his head. "That's too bad. These rich people don't like it when things don't go as planned." Sarah picked up the dessert tray, but she did not move toward the dining room. She stood there, thinking. Her grandmother's voice came back to her from long ago. "Music is a gift, little one," her grandmother used to say. "If you have the gift, you should share it." Music makes people happy when they are sad, but Sarah was scared. What if she was not good enough? What if the rich people laughed at her? What if she made a mistake and lost her job? Her family could not afford for her to lose this job. She walked back to the dining room with the desserts. The guests were talking louder now. She could hear some of them asking about the music. "When does the piano player start?" asked the man at table 4. "I was looking forward to the music," said the elderly woman at table 7. "It's the best part of these dinners." Sarah served the desserts and watched Mrs. Henderson. The woman was still making phone calls, but her face showed that she was not having any luck. Mr. Williams kept looking at his watch and then at the guests. At table 9, Sarah heard a conversation. That made her stop. "My wife has been feeling very sad lately," a gray-haired man told his friend. "The doctor said music might help her feel better. That's why we came tonight." His wife sat next to him. She was a thin woman with kind eyes, but Sarah could see sadness in her face. The woman kept looking at the piano with hope. Sarah's heart felt heavy. This woman needed music tonight. Maybe other people did too. Music had always made Sarah feel better when life was hard. Maybe it could help these people too, even if they were rich. She finished serving desserts and went to clean more tables. But she could not stop thinking about her grandmother's words. If you have the gift, you should share it. Mrs. Henderson was now talking to some of the guests, probably preparing to tell them there would be no music. Sarah could see the disappointment starting to spread across their faces. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Henderson began to speak, but her voice was shaky. "I'm afraid I have some bad news about tonight's musical entertainment." Sarah felt the feeling in her chest grow even stronger. It was like something was pushing her forward. Before she knew what she was doing, she was walking toward Mrs. Henderson. "Excuse me," Sarah said quietly. Mrs. Henderson stopped talking and looked at Sarah with surprise. Some of the guests looked at her too. Sarah felt her face get hot. She was not used to so many eyes on her. I can play piano," Sarah said. Her voice was so quiet that Mrs. Henderson had to lean closer to hear her. Mrs. Henderson's eyes got wide. "You can play piano?" Sarah nodded. "I taught myself. I'm not professional, but I know some songs that people like." Mrs. Henderson looked at the piano, then at the guests, then back at Sarah. "Are you sure? These people are used to very good music?" Sarah's heart was beating fast. She looked at the sad woman at table 9. She looked at Mrs. Patterson, who was still hoping for music. She thought about her grandmother and all the hours she had spent learning songs on that old piano. "I can try," Sarah said. "If it's not good, I can stop." Mrs. Henderson thought for a moment. She looked around the room at all the disappointed faces. She looked at her phone, probably hoping for a miracle call from a professional pianist. But the phone was quiet. "Okay," Mrs. Henderson said finally. "But just a few songs. Something soft and nice." Sarah felt excited and terrified at the same time. She had never played in front of so many people. She had only played for her family and sometimes for herself when she was alone. She walked toward the piano, and every step felt like a mile. The guests watched her with curious eyes. Some of them looked confused. Why was the waitress walking to the piano? Sarah sat down on the piano bench. It was a nice bench, much better than the broken chair she used at home when she played her mother's old keyboard. She lifted the piano cover and saw the beautiful black and white keys. The piano was much nicer than any piano she had ever played. It was shiny and new. She touched one key gently and it made a perfect clear sound. This piano had been taken care of very well. She looked out at the guests. Now everyone was watching her. The talking had stopped. Even the waiters had stopped. Moving to see what was happening, Sarah saw Mr. Williams standing near the kitchen door. He looked worried. She knew he was thinking about the restaurant's reputation. What if she played badly? What if the guests got angry? But then Sarah looked at the sad woman at table 9 again. The woman was looking at her with hope in her eyes. Sarah thought about her grandmother, who had died 2 years ago. Her grandmother had always believed that Sarah had a special gift for music. "Play from your heart," her grandmother used to say. "Don't think about making mistakes. Think about making people feel something beautiful." Sarah took a deep breath. She put her hands on the keys. They felt familiar and comfortable, like old friends. She closed her eyes for a moment and remembered the first song her grandmother had taught her. It was a simple song, but it was beautiful. Her grandmother had hummed it while cooking dinner or folding clothes. It was a song that made people feel peaceful and happy. Sarah began to play. The first notes filled the quiet room. They were soft and gentle, like a whisper. Some of the guests leaned forward to hear better. The song was called Clair de Lune by a composer named Debussy. Sarah had learned it from a video she found at the library. She had practiced it hundreds of times on her mother's old keyboard. But it sounded much more beautiful on this perfect piano. As she played, Sarah felt her nervousness start to go away. The music felt natural, like breathing. Her fingers knew exactly where to go. The song flowed out of her like water from a fountain. She opened her eyes and looked at the guests. Something amazing was happening. The confused looks were gone. The impatient expressions had disappeared. People were listening with their whole hearts. The sad woman at table 9 had tears in her eyes. but they looked like happy tears. Her husband was holding her hand and smiling. Mrs. Patterson was leaning back in her chair with her eyes closed, enjoying every note. Even the younger guests, who usually looked at their phones during dinner, were watching Sarah with amazement. The music was reaching everyone, no matter how old or young they were. Sarah finished the first song. The room was completely quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, the guests began to clap. It was not loud clapping, but it was warm and real. "That was beautiful," called out the sad woman from table 9. "Please play another song." Other guests nodded and smiled at Sarah. For the first time all night, they were really seeing her. Not as a waitress, but as a person who had just given them something wonderful. Sarah felt a warm feeling spread through her whole body. This was what her grandmother had meant about sharing the gift. This was why music was special. It could make people feel connected to each other, even if they were very different. She put her hands back on the keys. She was ready to play another song. Not everyone in the room was happy about Sarah playing piano. After the first song ended, Sarah could hear whispers starting at some of the tables. "Is this really happening?" a woman in a red dress asked her husband. "They're letting the waitress play piano." "I paid $200 for this dinner," said a man in an expensive suit. "I expected a real pianist, not some amateur." Sarah heard these words and they hurt, but she also heard other voices. "She played that beautifully," said Mrs. Patterson to her friend. "I don't care if she's a waitress or a princess." Sarah tried not to listen to the negative comments, but it was hard. She looked at Mrs. Henderson, who gave her an encouraging nod. The event organizer seemed surprised but pleased with how the first song had gone. Sarah decided to play another song. This one was called "The Moonlight Sonata" by Beethoven. It was harder than the first song, but Sarah knew it well. She had spent many nights practicing it on her mother's keyboard while her family slept. As she began to play, more whispers started around the room. "This is embarrassing," said a young man at table 6. He pulled out his phone and started recording. "Wait until my friends see this. A waitress thinks she can play classical music." His girlfriend giggled. She probably learned this from YouTube. "This is going to be hilarious." Several other people also took out their phones. Some were recording because they thought Sarah would make mistakes. Others were recording because they were genuinely impressed with the first song. The businessman at table 12 was not happy at all. He called over another waiter. "What is the meaning of this?" he asked loudly. "I bring important clients here. For a professional experience, this is not what I paid for." His voice was loud enough that many people could hear him. Sarah felt her face get red with embarrassment. Her hands started to shake a little as she hit a wrong note. The wrong note seemed very loud in the quiet room. Some people made disapproving sounds. The man with the phone snickered and kept recording. "See?" said the woman in the red dress. "I knew this would be a disaster, but something unexpected happened." Instead of stopping, Sarah took a deep breath and continued playing. The wrong note became part of the music somehow. She turned it into something beautiful by changing the next few notes. Her grandmother had taught her this trick. "Mistakes are just new paths to explore," she used to say. "Don't be afraid of them. Use them to find something even better." Sarah closed her eyes and let the music flow through her. She stopped thinking about the people who were judging her. She stopped worrying about making mistakes. She just played from her heart, the way her grandmother had taught her. The doubting voices began to get quieter. Even the businessman who had complained was starting to listen more carefully. The music Sarah was making was not perfect, but it was real. It had feeling in it that many professional pianists never achieved. At table 8, an elderly man recognized the song. He had heard it many times before, but never quite like this. Sarah was playing it with a sadness that came from real-life experience. She understood the loneliness in Beethoven's music because she had felt loneliness too. "Harold," the man whispered to his friend, "listen to how she plays this part. She really understands what Beethoven was feeling." Harold listened more carefully. He was a music professor at the local college. He had heard hundreds of students play this same piece. But there was something special about the way Sarah played it. The young man who had been recording to make fun of Sarah stopped smiling. The music was getting to him too. His girlfriend put down her champagne glass and really listened for the first time all evening. "This is actually really good," she whispered to her boyfriend. "Maybe we shouldn't post this video to make fun of her." But not everyone was changing their mind. The businessman was still angry. He whispered loudly to his clients. "This is exactly what's wrong with this place," he said. "No standards anymore. Anyone thinks they can do anything." His clients looked uncomfortable. They could see that the music was actually quite beautiful, but their business associate was clearly upset. Sarah could feel the tension in the room. Some people were enjoying the music, but others were not. She wondered if she should stop playing and go back to serving tables. Maybe this had been a mistake. She looked at the sad woman at table 9. The woman was still listening with tears in her eyes, but now she was smiling too. The music was helping her, just like her husband had hoped. This gave Sarah strength to continue. She thought about why she had started playing in the first place. It was not to impress the rich people or to show off. It was to help people feel better through music. She moved into the most difficult part of the song. Her fingers danced across the keys with confidence now. She had practiced this section so many times that her hands knew it perfectly. The room became quieter as people heard how complicated the music was. Even those who had been skeptical were starting to realize that Sarah was not just playing simple songs. This was serious classical music, and she was playing it very well. "How did a waitress learn to play like this?" asked a woman at table 4. "Maybe she went to music school," suggested her friend. "If she went to music school, what is she doing waiting tables?" The first woman asked. This was a question that many people in the room were starting to wonder about. How did someone with this much musical talent end up serving their dinner? What was her story? The music professor, Harold, was studying Sarah's technique carefully. He could see that she was self-taught. Her hand positions were not exactly perfect, but her musical understanding was exceptional. She played with emotion that could not be taught in any school. "She's remarkable," he whispered to his friend. "Completely self-taught, I think, but with natural talent that's rare." As Sarah played the most beautiful part of the song, even the businessman stopped complaining. The music was so lovely that it was hard to stay angry while listening to it. The young couple who had been recording put their phones away completely. They were no longer thinking about making fun of Sarah. They were just enjoying the music, but Sarah could still feel the tension. She knew that when the song ended, there would be mixed reactions. Some people would clap, and others would complain. Some would appreciate what she had done, and others would think she had stepped out of her place. She decided she did not care anymore. The music was more important than their opinions. The sad woman at table 9 needed this music. Mrs. Patterson needed it. Maybe even some of the skeptical people needed it, even if they did not know it yet. Sarah played the final notes of the Moonlight Sonata with all the feeling she had inside her. The last note hung in the air like a perfect crystal. The room was completely silent. Then something unexpected happened. The silence stretched on and on. It was not an uncomfortable silence anymore. It was the kind of silence that happens when people have just experienced something beautiful and need a moment to understand what they have felt. Finally, slowly, the applause began. The applause started quietly, but it grew stronger and stronger. Sarah opened her eyes and saw something she had never expected. Even the people who had been complaining were clapping now. The businessman who had been angry was clapping slowly, with a confused look on his face. It was like he could not believe what he had just heard. His business clients were clapping enthusiastically and smiling at him. "Where did you find this place?" one of his clients asked. "This is incredible." The young couple who had been recording were clapping the loudest of all. The woman had tears in her eyes. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," she said to her boyfriend. "I feel like my heart is full." Sarah felt overwhelmed by all the attention. She was used to being invisible. Now, everyone in the room was looking at her and clapping for her. She did not know what to do with her hands or where to look. Mrs. Henderson walked over to the piano with a big smile on her face. That was wonderful. Sarah, she said, would you play one more song? Before Sarah could answer, voices from around the room called out. Yes, please play another one. That was beautiful. We want more music. Even Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who came every month for the music, was nodding and smiling. She looked happier than Sarah had ever seen her. Sarah looked around the room and saw faces she had never really seen before. All these months she had served these people their dinner, but she had never seen them really smile at her. She had never seen them look at her like she was a real person with feelings and talents. Now they were looking at her with respect and appreciation. It felt strange and wonderful at the same time. What would you like me to play? Sarah asked. Play something. Happy, called out the sad woman from table 9. She was not sad anymore. Her face was bright and cheerful. Play something we all know, suggested another guest. Sarah thought for a moment. Then she smiled and put her hands back on the keys. She began to play Amazing Grace, but not the way most people knew it. She played it the way her grandmother had taught her, with jazz rhythms and beautiful decorations. The transformation in the room was complete now. People began to sway gently with the music. Some hummed along quietly. The anger and skepticism were gone, replaced by joy and wonder. Harold, the music professor, leaned forward in his chair. He could not believe what he was hearing. Sarah was not just playing the song the way it was written. She was creating her own version, adding her own style and feeling to it. She's improvising, he whispered to his friend. She's making up her own arrangements as she goes. That takes years of training to do well, but Sarah had not had years of training. She had taught herself everything by listening to music and practicing on her mother's old keyboard. She played by feeling, not by rules. The businessman realized he had been wrong to complain. This was not amateur music. This was something special and rare. He looked at his clients and saw how much they were enjoying the evening. I'm sorry I complained earlier, he said to the waiter. This is actually quite remarkable. As Sarah played, she began to feel more confident. The fear was melting away, replaced by pure joy. This was what she had always dreamed of doing, playing music for people who appreciated it. Making people happy with her gift, she looked at the faces around the room and saw something beautiful. Rich or poor, old or young, the music was touching everyone the same way. For these few minutes, the differences between them did not matter. They were all just people enjoying beautiful music together. The sad woman at table 9 was holding her husband's hand and smiling through happy tears. Her husband looked at Sarah with gratitude. The music was doing exactly what the doctor had hoped it would do. Mrs. Patterson was clapping gently along with the rhythm. She had been coming to these dinners for 5 years, and this was the best music she had ever heard here. Even the restaurant staff had stopped working to listen. Carlos, the chef, was standing in the kitchen doorway with a huge smile on his face. The other waiters were gathered around the edge of the room. Proud of their co-worker, Mr. Williams, the restaurant manager, was no longer worried about the restaurant's reputation. He could see that the guests were having a wonderful time. Some of them were already talking about coming back next month. Sarah finished Amazing Grace and moved smoothly into another song. This one was Somewhere Over the Rainbow, but she played it like a classical piece, with rich harmonies and delicate touches. The young woman who had giggled earlier was now crying happy tears. The music reminded her of her grandmother, who used to sing this song to her when she was little. This is magic, she whispered to her boyfriend. Actual magic, her boyfriend nodded. He was thinking about posting the video he had recorded, but not to make fun of Sarah anymore. He wanted to share something beautiful with the world. As Sarah played, she thought about her grandmother. She could almost feel her grandmother's presence in the room, smiling and proud. Her grandmother had always said that music was meant to be shared, that it was a gift that grew stronger when you gave it away. You're making everyone happy, little one, Sarah could almost hear her grandmother saying. This is what music is for. The room was completely transformed now. Instead of separate tables of wealthy people showing off to each other, it had become a community of people sharing a beautiful experience together. People who had never spoken to each other before were smiling and nodding at each other across the room. The music was connecting them in a way that money and social status never could. Sarah realized that something had changed inside her too. For the first time in years, she felt like she was doing what she was meant to do. Not serving tables or cleaning up after other people, but sharing her gift and making people happy. The music professor was already making plans in his head. He wanted to talk to Sarah after her performance. He wanted to know her story and find out if she would be interested in studying music formally. Several other people in the room were having similar thoughts. A woman who owned an art gallery was thinking about hosting a concert. A man who organized events for the city was wondering if Sarah would play at other functions, but Sarah did not know about any of these thoughts yet. She was lost in the music, playing song after song, each one more beautiful than the last. She was finally free to be herself, to share the gift that had been hidden inside her for so long. The transformation was complete. The waitress had become a musician. The invisible servant had become the center of attention. The ordinary evening had become something magical. And everyone in the room knew they were witnessing something special, something they would remember for the rest of their lives. As Sarah continued playing, people in the room began to understand that they were experiencing something extraordinary. This was not just good music from a waitress. This was exceptional music from someone who had a rare and special gift. Harold, the music professor, was studying every note Sarah played. He had taught music for 30 years and had heard thousands of students. But Sarah played with a combination of technical skill and emotional depth that was truly remarkable. "How is this possible?" he whispered to his friend. "She has no formal training, but she plays like someone who has studied for decades." Sarah moved from Somewhere Over the Rainbow into a piece by Chopin. It was called Nocturne in a Flat Major, and it was very difficult to play well. But Sarah's fingers moved across the keys like they had been born to play this music. The guests were completely silent now, afraid to make even the smallest sound that might interrupt the beautiful music. They watched Sarah's hands with amazement, seeing how effortlessly she played the most complicated passages. "I've never heard this piece played so beautifully," said Mrs. Patterson to her neighbor. "Not even at the symphony." The businessman who had complained earlier was now completely embarrassed about his earlier behavior. He realized that he had almost ruined something precious because of his own prejudices. "I was so wrong," he said quietly to his clients. "I judged her because she's a waitress, but talent doesn't care about job titles." His clients nodded in agreement. They were all successful people who had achieved great things in their careers, but they recognized real talent when they heard it. As Sarah played, her story began to emerge through her music. Each song told a part of her life. The sadness of growing up poor, the hope of dreams that seemed impossible, the strength that came from helping her family survive. The sad woman at table 9 understood this immediately. She could hear her own struggles in Sarah's music. The loneliness, the fear, the moments of despair, but also the determination to keep going. "She knows," the woman whispered to her husband. "She knows what it feels like to hurt and to hope at the same time." Her husband nodded. He could see that the music was healing something inside. His wife, the doctors and medicine, had not been able to reach. Sarah finished the Chopin piece and paused for a moment. She looked around the room and saw something she had never seen before. Rich, powerful people were looking at her with respect and admiration. But more than that, they were looking at her with understanding. The music had shown them who she really was. Not just a waitress, but a person with dreams, struggles, and an incredible gift. For the first time, they saw her as an equal, maybe even as someone special. The young couple who had been recording was amazed by what they had captured on their phones. They had videos of a waitress creating magic with a piano. They knew they had recorded something that would touch people's hearts. "We have to share this," the woman said to her boyfriend. "The whole world needs to see this. But should we ask her first?" The boyfriend asked. "Maybe she doesn't want to be famous." They looked at Sarah, still sitting at the piano, and wondered what her dreams were. Did she want to be a professional musician? Or was she happy with her quiet life, playing music just for the joy of it? Sarah began her next song, and it answered their question. She played Für Elise by Beethoven, but she played it with such passion and longing that everyone could feel her deepest desires. This was not someone who was content to hide her talent. This was someone who had dreams of sharing her music with the world. But life had not given her the opportunities that others had. Harold, the music professor, was making notes in his mind. He was thinking about scholarships, about auditions, about all the ways he could help Sarah develop her incredible gift. "This is what we're supposed to do," he told his friend. "When we find real talent, we're supposed to help it grow." A woman at table 5 was thinking similar thoughts. She was the director of the city's Cultural Arts Foundation. Her job was to find and support talented artists who needed help getting started. "I've been looking for someone like this for years," she thought. "Someone with raw talent who just needs a chance." Sarah's music was revealing not just her own story, but the stories of everyone in the room. The businessman remembered when he was young and poor, working 3 jobs to pay for college. The elderly woman thought about her own dreams, that she had given up to raise her family. Everyone had sacrifices they had made, dreams they had put aside, talents they had never fully explored. Sarah's music reminded them of what it felt like to have big dreams and the courage to pursue them. As Sarah played, her confidence grew even more. She began to add her own creative touches to the classical pieces, making them uniquely hers. She was not just playing the music as it was written. She was interpreting it, improving it, making it her own. She's not just talented, Harold realized. She's gifted. There's a difference. Talent can be taught, but this kind of gift is born in a person. The restaurant staff was amazed by their coworker. They had worked with Sarah for years, but they had never known about her musical abilities. Carlos, the chef, was thinking about all the times Sarah had hummed while working. And now he understood why those simple melodies had sounded so beautiful. She's been hiding this gift all along, he thought, working so hard to survive that she never had time to share what was inside her. Mrs. Henderson was already making plans. She was thinking about next month's charity dinner and wondering if Sarah would consider being the featured entertainment. But then she realized that after tonight, Sarah might have much bigger opportunities than playing at monthly dinners. The transformation in the room was complete, but it was more than just people changing their minds about Sarah. The music was changing the people themselves. It was reminding them of what was truly important in life. Money and status seemed less important when faced with pure talent and beauty. The expensive clothes and jewelry seemed silly compared to the richness of Sarah's gift. "This is what matters," Mrs. Patterson thought. "Not what we own or what we do for work, but what we can give to each other." Sarah played for almost an hour, moving from song to song without stopping. Each piece revealed more of her extraordinary abilities. She played classical music, jazz arrangements, popular songs, and even some pieces that seemed to be her own compositions. The guests sat in amazement, realizing that they were witnessing something that would happen only once in their lifetimes. This was not just a dinner with music. This was a discovery of greatness. "We're seeing the birth of a star," the Arts Foundation director thought. 20 years from now, we'll all tell people we were here the night Sarah Martinez was discovered." But Sarah was not thinking about fame or the future. She was lost in the joy of sharing her music with people who truly appreciated it. For the first time in her adult life, she was doing exactly what she was meant to do. The music filled every corner of the room, touched every heart, and changed every person there. They had come for an ordinary charity dinner, but they were leaving with something much more valuable. They were leaving with the memory of witnessing pure talent, raw emotion, and the power of music to transform both the performer and the audience. As Sarah played her final song of the evening, everyone in the room knew that their lives had been changed by what they had experienced. And they all knew that Sarah's life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. When Sarah played the final note of her last song, the room fell into complete silence. It was not the uncomfortable silence from earlier in the evening. This was the kind of silence that happens when people have just experienced something so beautiful that they need time to understand what they have felt. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Sarah sat at the piano, her hands still on the keys, wondering if she had done something wrong. Had she played too long? Had she made a mistake? Then, suddenly, the silence exploded into the loudest applause Sarah had ever heard. It was not polite, clapping like at the end of a dinner. This was real appreciation, the kind of applause that comes from the heart. People were standing up from their chairs, clapping with tears in their eyes. The businessman who had complained earlier was clapping. The hardest of all, he had learned something important about himself tonight. "Bravo!" called out Harold, the music professor. "Absolutely magnificent." Mrs. Patterson was crying happy tears as she clapped. She had been going to concerts and musical events for 70 years, and this was one of the most moving performances she had ever heard. "That was incredible," she called out to Sarah. "You have a gift from God." The young couple was clapping and crying at the same time. They had recorded most of Sarah's performance, and they already knew they had captured something special. "I've never heard anything like that," the young woman said. "You made me feel things I didn't know I could feel." As the applause continued, people began to leave their tables and walk toward the piano. They wanted to talk to Sarah, to tell her how her music had affected them. The first person to reach her was the sad woman from table 9. She was not sad anymore. Her face was bright and full of life. "Thank you," she said to Sarah, taking her hands. "My doctor said music might help with my depression, but I never believed it until tonight." "You've given me hope again." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the woman's words. She had never thought that her music could actually help heal people. She had just wanted to fill the silence when the professional pianist did not come, Harold the music professor was waiting to talk to Sarah next. He had his business card ready. "Young lady," he said, "I teach at the conservatory downtown. I have never heard anyone play with such natural talent. Would you consider coming to audition for our program?" Sarah looked at the business card in confusion. "I can't afford music school," she said quietly. "I have to work to help my family. We have scholarships," Harold said quickly. "Full scholarships for students with exceptional talent. And I think you qualify." Behind Harold, other people were waiting to talk to Sarah. The director of the Arts Foundation was there with her own business card. A woman who owned an art gallery wanted to discuss hosting a concert. A man who organized events for the city wanted to hire Sarah for other functions. Sarah had never had so many people wanting to talk to her at once. She was used to being invisible, and now she was the center of attention. The businessman who had complained earlier approached with his business clients. He looked embarrassed about his earlier behavior. "I owe you an apology," he said to Sarah. "I judged you unfairly because of your job. What you did tonight was extraordinary, and I'm sorry I didn't appreciate it from the beginning." His clients nodded in agreement. "We're visiting from out of town," one of them said. "We're going to tell everyone we know about what we heard tonight. You're going to be famous." Sarah felt scared by the word famous. She had never wanted to be famous. She just loved music and wanted to share it with people. Mrs. Henderson was managing the crowd of people who wanted to talk to Sarah. She was proud that her event had turned into something so special, but she could see that Sarah was feeling overwhelmed. "Let's give Sarah some space," she announced. "She's had a long evening of work, and now she's given us this beautiful gift of music." But people did not want to leave. They wanted to talk to Sarah, to learn her story, to understand how someone with so much talent had been working as a waitress. "How did you learn to play like that?" asked the young woman who had recorded the performance. "Where did you study music?" asked another guest. "Have you written any of your own songs?" asked the gallery owner. Sarah tried to answer all their questions, but there were so many people talking at once. She explained that she had taught herself to play by watching videos at the library. She told them about her grandmother's old piano and the broken keyboard at home. People were amazed by her story. They could not believe that someone with no formal training could play at such a high level. "This is even more impressive than we thought," Harold said to the Arts Foundation director. "She's completely self-taught. Can you imagine what she could do with proper training?" The Arts Foundation director was already making plans in her head. "We need to help her," she said. "This kind of talent should not be wasted." As people talked about Sarah's future, Sarah herself was thinking about her present. She still had tables to clean and dishes to wash. Her shift did not end just because she had played piano for an hour, but Carlos, the chef, had been watching everything. From the kitchen, he came out and spoke to Mr. Williams, the restaurant manager. "Let Sarah go home early tonight," Carlos suggested. "She's given us something incredible." "We can handle the cleanup," Mr. Williams agreed immediately. He could see how the evening had affected all the guests. They were all talking about coming back to the restaurant, hoping to hear Sarah play again. "This is the best publicity we've ever had," he told Carlos. "Sarah has made this restaurant famous tonight." As people continued to talk to Sarah, someone unexpected joined the conversation. It was the mayor of the city, who had been sitting quietly in the corner with his wife. "Sarah," the mayor said, "I'd like to talk to you about playing at some city events. We have a summer concert series in the park, and I think people would love to hear you perform." Sarah could hardly believe what was happening. A few hours ago, she had been worried about losing her job if she made a mistake at the piano. Now the mayor was offering her paid performances. I don't know what to say," Sarah stammered. "Say yes," encouraged Mrs. Patterson. "The whole city should hear your music." The young couple who had recorded Sarah's performance were already posting videos on social media. They had asked Sarah's permission first, and she had agreed, not really understanding what it meant. "This is going to go viral," the young man predicted. "By tomorrow morning, millions of people will have seen these videos." Sarah did not fully understand what going viral meant, but she could see the excitement in everyone's faces. Something big was happening. And it was all because she had found the courage to step up to the piano. As the evening wound down, people exchanged contact information with Sarah. Business cards piled up in her hands. Music teachers, event organizers, talent agents, and art supporters. "Don't make any big decisions tonight," Harold advised her. "Take time to think about what you want to do. But please call me tomorrow. We need to talk about your future." Sarah looked around the room one more time. These people who had been strangers to her a few hours ago were now talking about her future, making plans to help her, treating her like someone important. The transformation was complete. She was no longer just a waitress who happened to play piano. She was a musician who happened to work as a waitress. And everyone in the room knew that her waitressing days might soon be coming to an end. As Sarah finally left the restaurant that night, her apron folded in her bag and a handful of business cards in her pocket, she knew that her life had changed forever. She just had no idea how much it was about to change. Sarah woke up the next morning to the sound of her phone ringing non-stop. She had worked until almost 1 in the morning at her second job, cleaning offices downtown. She was exhausted and confused about why her phone was making so much noise. When she looked at her phone, she saw dozens of missed calls and hundreds of text messages. Most of them were from numbers she did not recognize. Her heart started beating fast. Had something happened to her family? She called her mother, who answered immediately. "Sarah," her mother said excitedly. "Have you seen the internet? You're famous." "What are you talking about, Mom?" Sarah asked, still half asleep. "Your brother showed me. There are videos of you playing piano, and they're everywhere. Millions of people have watched them already." Sarah sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. She remembered the young couple who had asked to record her performance. She had said yes, but she had not thought much about it. "How many people?" Sarah asked. "Carlos from the restaurant called this morning," her mother continued. "He said reporters want to interview you. And there's a man from a record company who wants to talk to you." Sarah felt dizzy. This was all happening too fast. Yesterday she had been a waitress who played piano as a hobby. Now, her mother was talking about record companies and reporters. She got dressed quickly and went to the library to use their computers. She wanted to see these videos for herself. When she searched for her name online, she could not believe what she found. The videos from the restaurant had been shared thousands of times. People from all over the world were commenting on them. The comments were in different languages, but Sarah could understand the ones in English and Spanish. "This made me cry happy tears," wrote someone from Canada. "I've never heard anything so beautiful," commented a person from England. "She plays better than most professionals," said a music teacher from California. Sarah read comment after comment. People were sharing the videos with their friends and families. They were talking about how her music had made them feel. Some people said her performance had inspired them to pursue their own dreams, but it was not just regular people watching the videos. Sarah saw that famous musicians and music critics had also shared them. A well-known pianist had written, "This is what real talent looks like. We need to help this young woman." Sarah's phone rang while she was reading the comments. It was Mrs. Henderson from the restaurant. "Sarah, you need to come in today," Mrs. Henderson said. "There are reporters here wanting to interview you. And I have a stack of messages from people who want to hire you for events. I'm supposed to work my other job today," Sarah said. "I think you should call in sick," Mrs. Henderson suggested. "This is bigger than any of us expected." Sarah walked to the restaurant, and she could not believe what she saw. There was a news van parked outside. Through the windows, she could see people with cameras and microphones inside the restaurant. When she walked in, everyone turned to look at her. Mr. Williams rushed over to greet her. "Sarah, there you are," he said. "These people have been waiting for you all morning." A woman with a microphone approached her. "Hi, Sarah, I'm Jennifer Lopez from Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about your amazing performance last night." Sarah had never been on television before. She felt nervous and excited at the same time. The reporter was very nice and asked her about her background, how she learned to play piano, and what it felt like to become famous overnight. "I don't feel famous," Sarah said honestly. "I feel the same as yesterday. I just love playing music." After the television interview, Sarah talked to a man from a major record label. He had flown in from New York that morning after seeing the videos. "We want to offer you a recording contract," he said. "We think you could be the next big star in classical crossover music." Sarah did not even know what classical crossover meant, but the man explained that it was music that combined classical pieces with popular styles. He said there was a big market for it and that Sarah's natural ability to blend different types of music made her perfect for it. "How much money are we talking about?" Sarah asked. She was thinking about her family's bills and her mother's medical expenses. The number the man mentioned made Sarah's head spin. It was more money than her family made in several years combined. But he also explained that making a record was a lot of work, and she would have to travel and perform in many different cities. While Sarah was trying to process all this information, Harold, the music professor, arrived at the restaurant. He had brought the dean of the music conservatory with him. "Sarah," Harold said, "I want you to meet Dr. Elizabeth Chun. She runs our conservatory program." Dr. Chun was an elegant woman with kind eyes. She had watched the videos of Sarah's performance and was amazed by what she had seen. "I've been teaching music for 25 years, Dr. Chun said, "and I've never seen raw talent like yours. We want to offer you a full scholarship to our program, plus a living allowance so you don't have to work while you study." Sarah felt overwhelmed by all the choices being presented to her. Record contract, music school, concert performances. It was more opportunities than she had ever dreamed of. Her phone kept ringing throughout the day. Event planners wanted her to play at weddings and corporate events. Concert halls were offering her performance opportunities. A talent agent wanted to represent her. By afternoon, the local newspaper had published a front-page story about Sarah titled "Hidden Genius Among Us." The article talked about how talent can be found in unexpected places and how important it is to support artists from all backgrounds. The story included quotes from the guests who had been at the restaurant the night before. The businessman who had initially complained was quoted as saying, "I learned not to judge people by their job titles. Sarah taught me that greatness can come from anywhere." Mrs. Patterson told the newspaper, "In 70 years of listening to music, I've never been more moved by a performance. Sarah has a gift that should be shared with the world." As Sarah read these comments, she realized that her performance had affected people in ways she had never imagined. She had not just played music. She had touched people's hearts and changed their perspectives, the young couple who had first recorded. Her performance contacted her through social media. They had started a crowdfunding campaign to help Sarah pursue her music career. In just one day, hundreds of people had donated money to support her. "We wanted to help," the young woman explained when she called Sarah. "Your music gave us so much joy, and we wanted to give something back." Sarah was amazed by the kindness of strangers. People she had never met were offering to help her succeed. It showed her that there was goodness in the world that she had never noticed before, but with all the excitement came difficult decisions. Should she take the record deal that promised immediate money but might limit her artistic freedom? Should she go to music school to develop her skills but delay her earning potential? Should she continue working at the restaurant while exploring these new opportunities? Carlos called her that evening with more surprising news. "Sarah," he said, "Mr. Williams wants to offer you a new job. He wants you to be our official pianist for special events. The pay is much better than waitressing, and you'd only work a few nights a week." Even her old job was changing because of her newfound fame. The restaurant was getting calls from people wanting to make reservations, hoping to hear Sarah play again. As Sarah lay in bed that night, surrounded by business cards, contracts to review, and newspaper clippings, she thought about how much her life had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday she had been worried about paying rent. Today she was choosing between opportunities that could make her rich and famous. It felt like a dream, but it was really happening. She thought about her grandmother, who had always believed in her musical gift. "I wish you could see this, Grandma," Sarah whispered into the darkness. "You always said music would take me places. I just never imagined it would happen so fast." The videos of her performance continued to spread online throughout the night, reaching more and more people around the world. Sarah's life was changing faster than she could understand, and she had no idea that the biggest changes were still to come. 3 weeks after her life-changing performance at the restaurant, Sarah sat in her small apartment trying to make the biggest decision of her life. The kitchen table was covered with contracts, scholarship offers, and business proposals. Each piece of paper represented a different future she could choose. Her mother sat across from her, holding a cup of coffee and looking worried. "You don't have to decide everything today," her mother said gently, "but you do need to make some choices soon." Sarah looked at the pile of papers. The record company was pressuring her for an answer about their contract. The music conservatory needed to know if she would accept their scholarship for the fall semester. The talent agent was setting up auditions in Los Angeles and New York. Everything was happening so fast. In 3 weeks, Sarah had gone from being unknown to having thousands of followers on social media. The videos of her restaurant performance had been viewed over 10 million times. News stations from around the country had interviewed her. Music magazines had written articles about her story, but fame came with complications Sarah had never expected. Reporters followed her to work. Strangers recognized her on the street. Her phone rang constantly with people wanting interviews, performances, or just trying to talk to her. "I miss being invisible," Sarah told her mother. "Yesterday I couldn't even go to the grocery store without people taking pictures of me." Her mother nodded understandingly. "But think about all the good things that have happened too." Sarah looked at another pile of papers on the table. These were letters and emails from people around the world who had been inspired by her story. A young girl in Ohio had started taking piano lessons after watching Sarah's videos. A man in Japan had written to say that Sarah's music helped him through a difficult time in his life. The most meaningful letter came from a woman in Texas who had been struggling with depression. She wrote that Sarah's performance at the restaurant had given her hope and inspired her to seek help from a therapist. "Your music saved my life," the woman had written. "I was in a very dark place, but hearing you play reminded me that beautiful things still exist in the world." Reading letters like this helped Sarah understand that her gift was about more than just making music. It was about touching people's hearts and maybe even changing their lives. Harold, the music professor, had become Sarah's unofficial advisor during these confusing weeks. He helped her understand the different contracts and opportunities. He also introduced her to other musicians who had faced similar decisions. "The most important thing," Harold told her, "is to stay true to your love of music. Don't let the business side destroy what makes you special." After much thought and many conversations with Harold, her family, and the people who wanted to help her, Sarah made her decision. Instead of choosing just one path, she would try to combine several opportunities in a way that worked for her life. She decided to accept the conservatory scholarship, but only as a part-time student. This would allow her to develop her skills, while still having time for performances and recording opportunities. The music school agreed to create a special program for her job situation. Sarah negotiated a deal with the Grandview restaurant. She would continue working there, but now as their featured pianist for special events rather than as a waitress. This gave her a steady income while allowing her to perform for appreciative audiences. She also accepted some of the performance opportunities that excited her most. The mayor hired her to play a series of concerts in the city park during the summer. A local hospital asked her to perform for patients, which reminded her of how music had helped a sad woman at the restaurant. The record deal was more complicated. Sarah decided to wait on signing with a major label. Instead, she worked with a smaller, independent company that gave her more artistic control. Her first album would be a collection of classical pieces arranged in her own unique style, but Sarah's most important decision was about giving back to her community. She remembered how lucky she felt to have access to the library's computers and free resources when she was learning music. She wanted other people to have similar opportunities. Working with the Arts Foundation director she had met at the restaurant, Sarah helped establish the Music for Everyone Scholarship Fund. This program would provide free music lessons and instruments to children from low-income families. "Every child should have the chance to discover their gifts," Sarah said at the program's launch event. "Music changed my life, and I want to help it change other lives too." The scholarship fund raised money quickly. Many of the wealthy guests from the restaurant donated generously. The businessman who had initially complained about Sarah's performance became one of the program's biggest supporters. "Sarah taught me that talent doesn't depend on money or status," he said. "Now I want to help other talented young people get the opportunities they deserve." 6 months after her breakthrough performance, Sarah's life had settled into a new routine that felt both exciting and manageable. She attended classes at the conservatory 3 days a week, improving her technique and learning music theory. She performed at the restaurant on weekends, where tables were now booked months in advance by people hoping to hear her play. Her summer concert series in the park drew thousands of people. Families brought picnic blankets and sat under the stars, listening to Sarah's unique arrangements of classical and popular music. These concerts were free, ensuring that everyone could enjoy the music regardless of their financial situation. The recording of her first album was going well. Sarah worked with producers who understood her vision of making classical music accessible to everyone. They helped her create arrangements that honored the original composers while showcasing her own musical personality. But the moment that meant the most to Sarah came on a quiet Tuesday evening at the restaurant. She was playing during a small dinner party when she noticed a young girl, maybe 8 years old, sitting with her grandparents. The girl watched Sarah's hands on the keys with complete fascination. When Sarah finished her set, the girl approached the piano shyly. "Are you really self-taught?" the girl asked. "Yes," Sarah said, kneeling down to the girl's level. I learned by practicing every day and never giving up on my dreams. My grandma says I have musical talent, but we can't afford lessons. The girl said sadly. Sarah smiled and pulled out one of the Music for Everyone program brochures from her purse. Have your grandmother call this number tomorrow, she said. We have scholarships for kids who love music. The girl's face lit up with hope. Her grandmother had tears in her eyes as she thanked Sarah. You're giving her the same gift someone gave you, the grandmother said. The chance to follow her dreams. That night, as Sarah walked home from the restaurant, she thought about how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been invisible, working multiple jobs just to help her family survive. Now, she was studying music at a prestigious conservatory, performing for thousands of people, and helping other young musicians get started. The videos of her restaurant performance still circulated online, inspiring new viewers every day. Music teachers showed them to their students as examples of what passion and dedication could achieve. The story had become a symbol of hope for people who felt trapped by their circumstances. Sarah still lived in the same small apartment with her mother and brother, though now they could afford to fix the air conditioning and buy some new furniture. Sarah had not let fame change her values or her connection to her family and community. Her grandmother's old piano, which had been stored in a corner for years, was now prominently displayed in their living room. Sarah played it every evening, practicing new pieces and composing her own music. Sometimes she thought about that nervous moment when she had approached Mrs. Henderson and offered to play piano for the disappointed guests. It had taken tremendous courage to step forward that night, to risk embarrassment and failure for the chance to share her gift. That moment of courage had changed everything. Not just for Sarah, but for everyone who had heard her play that night, and for the thousands of people who had been touched by her music since then. Music is meant to be shared, she could still hear her grandmother saying. It's a gift that grows stronger when you give it away. Sarah had learned that her grandmother was right. By sharing her gift, Sarah had not only changed her own life, but had also touched the lives of countless others. She had shown the world that extraordinary talent can emerge from the most unexpected places, and that with courage and determination, anyone can transform their life and the lives of others. She fell asleep that night. Sarah smiled, thinking about the little girl at the restaurant. Tomorrow, that girl might start her own musical journey. And who knew? Maybe someday she would find her own moment to step up to a piano and share her gift with the world. The circle of music and inspiration would continue, one performance at a time, one dream at a time, one life-changing moment of courage at a time.